welcome again to Data Beats Opinion. I'm your host, Keith, and today I am talking with Jason Resnick. Jason is similar to what I used to do in the consulting agency, helps online businesses, info products, e-commerce, get more customers, repeat customers, and really build out that conversion funnel. He's an expert in the space. He knows a lot about all this stuff, and I'm really excited to have you on this call. So
Yeah. No, thanks. I'm excited to be here, Keith. Thanks for inviting.
yeah. So a little bit of background. How did you kind of get started with all this?
Oh, so this is going to show my age a little bit, but I always loved e-commerce. Like I literally grew up on the internet, meaning like when I started college, there was no internet, and
Mhm.
by the time I finished, the internet was there, but it was not like what it is today
Right.
by any stretch of the imagination. And so I found in college, essentially, like I went to college for computer science, and I was like, I hate this. Like the fact that I have to like bottle up code, run a executable, deploy, like
Mhm.
wait however long for the thing to compile, and then see that I missed a semicolon is ridiculous, right? And so when I started there, and I literally cut my economics class and learned how to write HTML through that in
Mhm.
computer lab, really geeky. But my economics class was a 3-hour class, and it was long distance learning. So it was the most boring the TV show that you could ever imagine.
Right.
I learned code there, and that was where I first dove into the web. And as I got jobs, in the corporate space, I worked for, Fortune 50 companies, small boutique firms. But really, where I found my sweet spot as far as the love for e-commerce was right around 2000. I worked for a consultant firm that they were historically they were an SAP shop,
Mhm.
but because of the times, everybody there was startups everywhere and they
Right.
needed coders, and so I was brought in there because I had learned a specific language in my former one of my former jobs
Mhm.
called Tickle.
Yep.
And I didn't want to do anything like that. That was not interesting. And I got a job there, and I was writing a lot of Java code, Ruby code, and building out e-commerce sites.
Mhm.
And where a lot of developers ran from e-commerce because they didn't want to deal with it, I was like, oh, this is an awesome problem. I love solving the problem. And at that time, the problem was getting somebody to pull out their wallet and put their credit card in to the
Yep.
screen. Now we don't even
No one
blink at
trusted
it.
it. No,
Yeah,
like people marketing today don't have any, like
no,
it was so difficult to get someone to put their credit card online was
yeah.
insane.
Yeah, I mean, people would say their credit card over the phone, not a problem, but they
Mhm.
wouldn't put it into a form that was secure and everything else. Like it was like a genuine problem. And if
Yeah.
you could bridge that gap, and by earning trust, and we'll dive in because that's pretty much going to be the mantra here. Um, by earning trust at that point, then you can get and win. And
Yeah.
that's what Amazon, now Amazon is what Amazon is because of that. But I loved it, and just me as a human and my own personal interests, I love human behavior. So there was like this synergy there where I was like, okay, I'm solving interesting problem about human behavior to do
Mhm.
technical things, and so I just took that and ran with it. Like as soon as that ball was handed to me, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go until somebody tackles me. And so, I through my career, I always was doing e-commerce. That's what I was hired at other jobs for. But then in 2010, when I struck out and I started my own business full time, left the cubicle farms, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, I that's where I fell. Like I was doing Java development, I was doing Ruby on Rails development, custom
Yeah.
PHP work, Magento work, WooCommerce work, and so on and so forth. Really helping other businesses get like their final 20% of their business online, because a lot of these packages that they would either install or set up or whatever would get them 80% of the way there and see that there was some traction.
Mhm.
And then they're like, okay, well, we want to integrate our our inventory system, or we want to integrate our brick and mortar POS system, and and so on and so forth. And so that's where, in 2010, 2011, I was, really diving into a lot of that. And since I've really focused in on niching down and really on the WooCommerce space, because I was getting burnt out by doing all the tech,
Right.
various different techs bouncing around and not working on a tech stack for a certain period of
Yeah.
time. I focused in on WooCommerce, specifically subscription and membership type sites. And, to this day, it's more of not doing so much custom work on the site there in that realm, but it's more of how do I meld the behavior of a visitor, a customer,
Hmm.
a repeat customer through data that we have on the email subscriber record,
Right.
as well as what they're doing on site, and melding that together to essentially get more
And
purchases
and
from
it's
them.
interesting that you mentioned that because you kind of you struck out on your own with the e-commerce marketing stuff on your own about the same time I did. And back then there wasn't really the WooCommerce. There wasn't. You had to build all this stuff yourself,
Mhm,
and it's gotten to the point where building a system like that is no longer a high value proposition because there's so much out there. The high value proposition is a understanding what products are out there that will accomplish that, and then how to glue them all together. Just like you're
mhm.
saying, it's no longer as valuable for you to build an e-commerce platform. It's valuable for you to take WooCommerce and that visitor tracking, meld it all together so that people understand how those visitors are coming in and who's converting and who's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I noticed probably 5-ish years ago, and this was with Drip, that email marketing platform. They had a robust enough API that was able to pull the subscriber record. So, like, what the people are clicking on, what are
Hmm.
their custom fields, and what is the things that we know about them from the email world, like what behaviors they're taking, and then taking that information and sucking it on the site, and then turning some things around on the site
Yep.
to then cater to the knowledge that we know about them. And that's where I really was like, oh, this is next level stuff, because
Yeah.
now if we know that they're, for an e-commerce customer of mine, they do hats, t-shirts, bandanas, and so on and so forth. But if we know that they're really just looking at the hat stuff, well, then we just show them hat banners on the
Right.
homepage versus all of the banners, right? And
Yeah.
so just that sort of, personalized experience brings that mom and pop back to the internet world, right?
Yeah.
Like we're coming full circle, right? Like it was like, you have Amazon, these big behemoths where they're just like, hey, whatever
Hmm.
product you need, we've got it. And so that, while it's all great and convenient in some respects, what I think the trend is happening now is like people are like, I don't want to use Amazon because of that. Like, I want to
Right.
support my local business or local online business. I want to
Right.
support those
You want to
crafty
support the
type
brand.
people.
You want to support the
Right.
people, not a conglomerate. Right.
Exactly.
And it's interesting that you came at this from a technical side because, and you mentioned something really interesting there, which is the crafting of that message. If someone's looking at hats, we show them hats because I feel like a lot of marketers, especially with retargeting ads and things like that, there's a lot of spray and pray. And there's a lot of, and I see this a lot. I'll go to a site to look up. I'm getting retargeting ads. That's awesome. I sign up. I'm still getting retargeting ads to sign up. It's like, and then I'm getting ads for different. It feels weird, right? It's like when Amazon. What was the one you always see it on like Twitter and stuff? You buy a washing machine on Twitter or on sorry on Amazon, and then they're like, "Would you also like to buy this washing machine?" It's like, who buys two washing machines? Like,
Right. Yeah.
put
Yeah.
put some intelligence behind this idea. Otherwise, it's just this algorithmic spray and pray that stops being effective because you're no longer. I always say that advertisements that are interesting are no longer advertisements.
Right.
We wait for movie trailers to come out. We love movie trailers because they are aligned with our interest. If I'm looking to buy a car, having car commercials that align with the type of car that I want is interesting to me because I want to know what's out there.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
when I just bought a washing machine and you show me an ad for a washing machine, that doesn't help. It just
Yeah.
actively hurts that experience.
I mean, to that point, last week I even threw this out on Twitter. Was like Delta. come on, you know I live in New York. Why are you giving me emails for flights to New York? Like, I
You
get
fly
that
down the street.
I mean, I get the fact that I flew somewhere and then flew back to New York, but you know where I live. Like,
Hmm.
just come on. Like, just have some sort of semblance to, like completing the circle of personalization. Like,
Right.
that's what bothers me sometimes about personalization. And, at the time of this recording, we're going on the advent of Black Friday and
Yep.
Cyber Monday. And so our inbox are going to be like
It's gonna be insane.
obliterated with bad personalization. It's going to be
Mhm.
funny. But if you're going to do it, then you have to do the research. You have to really close the loop. You can't kind of go in and just step your toe in. More so, like, then if you're just going to do hi first name, okay, then do that. But if you're going to go to the level of like, hey, I'm going to take some of their information, like they bought a washing machine, so they must be interested in washing machines, and I'm going to repitch that. Like, okay, close the loop. Did they buy that? If they bought the washing machine, then pitch them a
The ups
clothes rack
right, the
or
upsell, the cross sell.
right, like just pitch them something related to that. Don't pitch them the thing that you just bought, because especially that they're not going to buy two of them,
Yep.
right? So
And I see that a lot. I think, I have a similar background to yours where I started on the tech side of things, right? And I think there's something about having to design software where you have to think about those flows and that encapsulation of when someone does this, do this. Does it make sense for? And so we see a very structured progression of someone down a funnel, and we're used to creating not flow charts and stuff of did someone do this, then send them this. Did they do this, then send them this, and having those gates there. Um, and I think that's something that a lot of people either don't have the knowledge behind, or that that they just they can't think through it as well, right? They don't understand the psychology of who is on their list and who's actually that people are actually reading these.
yeah, and so one of the things that I do with my clients when we first do an engagement is I want to know what the customer journey is, and then they go on and they say, "Hey, we're doing this remarketing, we're doing this ad," and I said, "I don't care about those stuff. That stuff we're going to get to, but your customers now." Can we figure out how they became a customer and work
Hmm.
backwards? Because that's what I want to find out. They're already paying you, so that
Where'd they come from?
you've already got the one, the $0 to $1 purchase, which is the hard thing. So we
Hmm.
want more of those people. Now let's reverse engineer back, right? And so the reason why I do it that way and have them think about this thing is so that they then understand the behavior of that customer, right?
Hmm.
Like you said before, they're doing the spray and pray. Like they're just okay. We're doing Facebook and Instagram ads because that's what everybody's doing in my market, right? And
Hmm.
so I need to do it too. But once we know a little bit about the customers, then that spray and pray actually becomes like a playbook that we can then deploy out there to attract more people, like people that are already paying for you.
Right.
So I I like, because I start with the end in mind there, I'm completing the circle already.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to have these open loops and saying, okay, all these people are coming in from all different directions. And then, like you said, you have these if then statements, if you will, that are just lengthy and complex and like overly built out. Well, let's just start with what we know works already, and then we can start building
You
off
can
of
build
that.
out from that. And I think that's why so many people start with the spray and pray because they don't know what works. They know they have customers, they don't know where they came from. So they're trying to recreate magic, right? And at the same time, they have those customers. And if they had the process that you walk them through, it's like, hey, here's how we find out where these people came from, what converted them from visitors into customers. If they were able to do that, they could work themselves back. But it's a talent, it's a
Mhm.
skill, right? And a lot of people do not have that. I think it would be very difficult for me to go into someone else's business and say, okay, here's a bunch of customers, let's figure out where they came from, right? I can do that in my business because I've honed it over the last 8 years, but to just jump into someone else's, I think it requires real talent. But that's how you stop that spray and pray, right? That's how you start with something very targeted and understand what sends people down that conversion funnel.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes hard to approach that from that perspective. Meaning, you know, because a lot of people are guarded. Like, I'm
Hmm.
guarded about my own business. Like I know my business better than anybody else. I'm in here all day long, right? So how is somebody else going to tell me how I got my customers? Well, I don't necessarily want to tell you how you got your customers. Your customers are going to tell you, right?
Exactly.
And so for me, it's more of just opening the lines of communication, saying, "Hey, look, we're on the same page here. I'm going to make some assumptions. I want to validate these assumptions, and I'm going to validate them with actual data. And so the data that you have is your customers. The
Hmm.
data that's up in the cloud somewhere on Facebook and profile, ID, whatever, I don't know what that person is, and they never gave you any money. So that's just hypothetical money at this point in time. So I much rather focus in on what we know,
Hmm.
get that humming along, and then we turn on the faucet of ad money or whatever it is, or whatever your campaign's going to be, and then feed that engine that's already working.
Right. And then how do you kind of, so going to the next step of, once you have identified this channel of where people come from and what kind of converts them and what brings them in, how do you then walk them through that marketing funnel, especially if, depending on the type of industry that you're working with, it's not
Mhm.
e-commerce. It's not this, okay, someone's going to buy in the first 3 days. Maybe it's 14 days or 30 days or 90 days. Like, how do you, A, bring people into that funnel, and or how do you engage them on that funnel, and B, how do you measure that and understand, are these quick converters or are these long-term converters?
Right. So what I always try to do and is find the time to first purchase. How many days are we talking about? That's
Hmm.
your sales cycle, right? So most of the time when I talk with a customer, they have this idea. They're like, oh, let's just take example, an info product, a coach or a course creator or something of that nature. They're like, oh, well, I run a week long campaign, three things, three training videos, a webinar at the end, and then people convert on the back end of a
Hmm.
weekend, right? I'm like, okay, but that really your first time? Like, how long have they been on your email list before that? And things
Right.
like that. So I always try to baseline it. I try to take my best ballpark guess because they're not measuring this based off of what I know about the customers when they bought, because they have that data,
Hmm.
and they have the data of how long they've been on the email list. I try to give my best guess on, okay, it took them 47 days, on average for you to close somebody once they come into your email.
Hmm.
And so having that information then is usually eye opening to them because they're like, whoa, I didn't realize it took so long. And then they start thinking about all the math. They're like, oh, well, how much are we spending in ad money? And this is what they're buying. Okay, so now then they
Now
get
you
the
have a cash
real
flow.
picture, right?
Yep.
And so what I try to do is I try to shorten that timeline by nurturing them through email, right? Because you can do the remarketing campaigns, you could do the calls to action on the websites and things, but you're leaving the user up to actually going on those platforms to actually see those things. The email is your proactiveness into it, right? Like you're sending them an email. So now they're going to check their email. The whole email is dead thing to me is mind boggling
They've been saying
because,
that for 20 years now.
yeah.
So
So it's like, okay, but every time you send an email, you get money. So how is it dead? So for me, if you're sending an email, then you're prompting them to take some action. They cannot
Mhm.
take any action at all, but at least they see it. You become front of mind. So I try to build out a 30-day sequence that every client that I have, I work with them to build out a 30-day sequence, which is usually like 10 to 12 different emails
Mhm.
um, that really position. Depends on the industry, like you said, but let's just take the info, course creator, digital product sort of industry, position the brand or the person as an
Mhm.
expert who knows what they do. But then we also want to lead score and do some other things that really align with the motivation of why somebody came in and
Right.
their intent. What are they hoping to get out of their engagement immediately from this brand, right? And
Mhm.
so we do that just by understanding the customers. Why did they sign up? What have they gotten from the brand, the
And do
person?
you do that through? surveys, is that through based on tags that they get when they opt in for, so if they're interested, if they opt in for, let's say, a marketing blueprint, and then they get the freelancers guide, like we can kind of start to build out a visual of them through the tags and the actions they're taking.
Absolutely. So some the thing that I found with surveys is that yes, they work if the survey is well crafted. You can't kind of come up and like, hey, we should send out a survey. Okay, so
Here's
on
the
Tuesday
40
we're just going to
questions.
throw out a thing like that. Doesn't work. You really have to know what you're doing for a survey to work.
Hmm.
So I'm more of like, hey, what pages are they looking at? What are they clicking on? What sort of and really it all stems from understanding what the customer is doing. Like you said, where did they come in from a lead magnet perspective? That's usually their hook.
Hmm.
That's their initial motivation. Like, okay, so if they pick that marketing, right? Okay, so if that's a marketing PDF that you're delivering to them, then can we show them more marketing content? And that
Hmm.
could shorten the time frame, right? Um, you know, I, I, I like to share this sort of thing that's with all my clients. I say, look, you could be a virtual trainer, right? And your product that you're trying to get people to sign up for is a workout routine for 20 minutes via Skype or whatever, right?
Hmm.
So that's your business. So that's what you want people to sign up. Why are you showing recipes as your lead magnet?
Right.
While all of that is in the same ecosystem, you're you're attracting the wrong type of person because they want to get healthy via food and nutrition.
And
They don't want to work out. So
yeah.
if you're wondering why you're not converting on the people that are signing up and getting, you're spending ads to that and all that, and why isn't anybody buying? Well,
And
you're
it's
not in alignment.
And it's interesting because I've had a number of customer clients like that, and they all say, well, it converts on the front end. It's like, of course it converts on the front end. People want that, but it's not converting on the back end because the people who you are bringing in, like you're saying, are not the ones who are right for your product. It doesn't matter if I get 10,000 leads who want to learn more about cars if I'm selling paleo drinks, right?
Right,
Like
right.
the offers are mismatched. But I think a lot of people think this thing converts really well and it's related to my ecosystem or my niche. So therefore, at some point, they're going to convert, and it just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it's hard pill to swallow, but when you actually lay it out with data, it's not me coming to the table saying, my assumptions. This is look at
Right.
the numbers here. Like you get, yeah, great. So you got 100 opt-ins yesterday to your recipe. How many how many of those people converted into workouts today?
Right.
Zero. Like, because it's a mismatch. And so
Yeah.
what I try to do with that sequence is really just one, lead score people, because to shorten the time, if somebody's really engaged with you, I mean, you and I have probably been down this road more than a handful of times when we're forced down a funnel that
Hmm.
we're like, oh, I just want to buy this thing. Like, that's my need right now. I don't
Yeah.
want to wait for a window to open up that I need to buy. Like, that's the thing with the lead scoring is you do have some finite amount of time where the euphoria of the shiny object, right, like starts
Hmm.
to wane, right? So they say, like, if you don't close somebody within 90 days, chances are you're not going to close them. But barring the industry and the product and all the
Right.
rest of it, if the score and there's a science to it and all that, but if the score is hot where you're sending an email every other day or every 3 days or whatever it is, and they start clicking on one or two links, and those links are aligned with the product and so on and so forth, and you pull them out,
You
you give
fast
them
track
what
them.
they want, and boom, and they make the sale, and you start to really hone in on that. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that with several clients, and we've shortened the time frames drastically. Like
Yeah.
info product, they were at around like 9-ish days to the first purchase, and we got them inside a day.
Wow.
A SaaS product, he was over 40, and this was a real ballpark figure because he had no data on that. But he was over 40, and we got him to 9 days with a
Right.
free trial, right? And so those sort of things matter.
Yeah. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't really look at, which is they say, oh, it takes us 40 days to close a lead. And they don't realize it's not that people want to wait those 40 days, it's that they haven't really been offered a chance to convert that quickly, right? And um, the the benefit there is, and I really like what you say, and I want to re-emphasize this because I think it's important, is measuring that velocity of engagement, especially at the beginning, and that lead scoring of, okay, people have clicked on, in the last 6 emails, 5 of these links about freelancing.
Mhm.
They are obviously very interested. We need to fast track them onto list, because I see that we had the same thing. We had I think it was a 20-day funnel before the sales really started pumping in for SegMetrics. And we decided, well, what if people sign up? Let's just tell them right there. So our first 3 days are a hard pitch. And we're just
Mhm.
like, hey, we're going to give you some awesome information real quick. We're SegMetrics A, B, C, D. You should check us out. And conversion went through the roof, because all these people, they do want that information. And the people who don't, after 3 days, it's fine. They go on the longer engagement campaign, and eventually within those 90 days, they'll probably come around, and they do come around.
Mhm.
But we were pushing so much back and extending this thing to a point where they weren't excited about the product anymore.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's like, why did I just ruin all this energy I have from someone who just found us and wants to check us out? Do you know Josh Duty, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Fearless Salary Negotiation. We talked with him a couple weeks ago, and he said the same thing, because he has negotiation funnels, right?
Mhm.
And he's like, I'm making everyone wait 14 days to get salary negotiation for an interview they have tomorrow, right? It's like,
Right.
why am I doing that?
Yeah, and I think that that's when it comes down to really knowing what you're selling, right? Like so, like
Hmm.
the case of SegMetrics or Josh's business, it's an immediate need. Like that, Google drove them. The question of you know, like, hey, I'm looking for this thing. How do I sign up for this thing? They are then like they want it. Like they
Hmm.
need to buy it now, right? So some of my customers are more long term. I do some nonprofits. I do some other businesses that have a longer sales cycle. So it's okay to assume that it's going to take 14 days for somebody to buy because they need that warm up time. But some like don't don't overbuild something. Like
Right.
see, like you said, like hey, first 3 days, look, we're going to give you some awesome value. Like you hang on this list, but here who we are. This is the price. This is how much it costs.
Yep.
And so on and so forth. Um, that's part of an email that I send. It's actually the fourth email in this sequence that I build out is it's a complete ask email. It's
Hmm.
saying, hey, I know we're just getting together. We're just learning about each other a little bit more. I'm excited about the opportunities. But because I give you so much value on the free side, I often forget about the paid side. And
Right.
so this is what we offer, and you give them whatever your main products are. But it just asking, even in that email, be
Hmm.
surprised how many people like boom buy. There's a lot of conversions off of that one email because you just asked, but you asked in a non-salesy type way, and
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah. So up until now, we've been talking a lot about kind of those evergreen funnels, the marketing funnels that are always there, always running through. I know you have a lot of experience with like launches, PLF, all the. It seems like everything's a PLF recently, um,
I
and
think you
maybe
just
I'm just.
ran another course or something.
And I will admit they work so well. PLF. I do get upset when people take PLF at face value and just literally do the PLF formula. Like they don't understand that it's a jumping off point to put your own spin on it, and that it's a strategy, because people just keep doing okay, here are my 3 videos and fourth,
Mhm.
and like you get tired of them after a while. But I kind of derailed ourselves there. But I was going to ask, like, what do you see as kind of the difference between that launch style funnel and the evergreen funnel, especially when you don't have time to go in and tweak stuff ahead of time because you're doing everything in real time.
Yeah. Well, launch mode is always interesting to me because it's like 90% of my clients I build out the evergreen stuff
Hmm.
for. not saying that they don't do launches and things, but for me, launch is always kind of like a high energy, high emergency,
Yeah.
high, like it's like, hey, we're dumping a bunch of money and we're going to get as many people into this thing as possible, and we're going to give them the juicy stuff so that they can sign up by Sunday. And so for me, the thing that I find a lot of times is that, and this is what I talk to with my clients a lot, is the reason why that works is because it's a numbers game. Like if you've got a
Hmm.
boatload of money to put up at the top of the funnel, yes, there's going to be some things falling through. And especially if your ad is good, that brings in those right kind of buyers, then yeah, it totally, that whole formula is just a math problem, right?
Hmm.
The cadence and everything. It's just a math. There's no, the reason why it's PLF, it's because it's that F is formula, right? So it's
Right.
just a math problem. But then they're like, okay, now we launched, right? And we got to do it again next quarter, right? Like we
Yeah.
did whatever, 100 grand or 200 grand or whatever it is, right? And so we need to do it again. And then I always come in and I say, okay, so you just got a whole boatload of people in,
Hmm.
right? And this was a great one because you got 5% conversion. Now you have
Hmm.
95% of those people that opted in. What are you doing with them?
Right. Are you gonna
So
launch? You're launching the same thing to them in a
right,
quarter, right? It's
exactly.
like,
So what I always try to do with that is then try to figure out how we can then not launch them next quarter, but how do we nurture them in a way that then makes total sense how they came in, they saw the ad, they saw the pitch, they saw all the bonuses they missed
hmm,
on and all the rest of it. At the end of the next 30 days, they're still excited. They just, timing wasn't right, money wasn't right, whatever the
right,
reason is, right? But they just didn't buy for whatever reason. Oftentimes I find it's more timing than money. It's
right.
just like they just don't have the time. They saw the ad, it was interesting, it's a need that they have. They just don't. No, I got other things going on. I
Right.
just don't want
Especially
to.
with courses, right? Because it's
Oh,
a commitment.
100%. Yeah, and you don't want to buy something and let it sit there in on your desktop or whatever, and like, oh yeah, I totally forgot I bought that thing, right? And
Yeah.
so people don't buy. But now you have 95% of the people that were actually hot for you right now sitting there. And then you're just going to send them your Tuesday morning broadcast about your podcast or whatever. Like that
Hmm.
just doesn't make any sense. What I've built off of the back of those kind of launches is another different 30-day sequence that really piggybacks off of that. It's a more of a longer sales cycle.
Hmm.
It's the same training, language, everything that they've launched with, just longer.
Right.
Like these are just people that the timing wasn't right. And you can recoup 10, 15, 25% of that 95 that fell through within that first 30 days
Yeah.
just by doing that. Just tailoring. And most of the time, these people have tons of content that is still related to everything that they just talked about for a week. Well, let's just give it to them.
Yeah.
And there's no reason why they can't. And then you could then, now you have grabbed those people, you've recouped a lot of your ad cost, and then at that point in time, next quarter, you're not, maybe you don't need one next quarter. And like
Right.
you pitch them. And the other thing too is, which is a really interesting little human psychology thing, is because a lot of times in that launch sequence, they're like, hey, you're never going to see this deal again. Well, if you pitch them 30 days later with the same thing with a higher price point, because that lower price point is, well, now you've already positioned yourself as not a liar.
Right.
Like you could position yourself as like, if it was 50% off on the launch, well, you're getting 30% now. And you saw that it was 50%. This
Hmm.
is the lowest cost ever, right? And
Right.
so you then go ahead and close the loop on that level too. So, for me, it's launches are a different beast because I look at the other side of the coin. Like I let the company, the person, all of that. I'll write all of the mechanics and the technical
Hmm.
aspects of it out for them, but I let them put the energy into that, and then I'll think about everybody else that's coming through. Like
Right.
you worry about your 5%ers because that's a good launch, right? Like
Hmm.
if you get 5% conversion, that's
That's
good,
huge. Yeah.
right? I'll worry about the vast majority of the people that fall through the cracks, and I want to recoup that, right? And
Hmm.
so that's that for me. I always look at launches as a 30-day thing rather than the week and a half, 2 weeks
Oh
that
yeah, definitely.
PLF does.
I mean, we find that the majority of sales happen day the cart closes, and then also the next week and a half afterwards when we do a reopen or we do a downsell or we do all the other stuff to kind of re-engage the people and maybe even just answer the questions of the people who were having problems that didn't want to buy, right?
Hmm.
Like just having support ready when they call, say, hey, I missed the sale but X, Y, and Z, like, oh yeah, that's definitely doable and we can regain that sale, right? There's just I think you're exactly right. It's almost always a timing problem.
Hmm.
If they weren't interested in the product or the content, they wouldn't be on the list.
Right. The hook is the ad, right? So like if you're selling marketing stuff, or if you're selling, you know, life coaching or whatever you're selling, right? Like
Hmm.
that ad, and you got that email address, then they're interested. They're interested in it in a way that is enough for them to at least see what else you got. And then as they go through, and you set up the mechanics in the way where you know that they've binge watched the videos, they've checked all the emails, they've clicked all the links, they saw the sales page, they're ready to buy. That person is probably willing to invest in whatever you're
Right.
selling. Well, if they didn't buy, I would say ask, right? You
Right.
just send them an email. Why didn't you buy?
What's going on?
You're going to get a lot of information back. But when you do ask, you'll say, yeah, look, I'm going away next month. Like, I just don't have the time for this. Or I missed the window of opportunity because I was away at a long weekend up at the lake. Or,
Hmm.
it's just always those sort of things. Whereas a lot of the business owners that I work with, they're like, maybe I should just lower my cost. Or maybe I should add a different bonus.
Yeah.
Or like, I'm like, well, why don't we just ask? Like,
Hmm.
and find out from there. So,
And I think it goes back to a bigger topic that I always get a little bit frustrated with. It's that, and I do this as well. It's looking at the people on my list as numbers instead of people, right?
mm,
And especially when you get up to the 50,000, 100,000, half a million size list, I think you start looking at things as a numbers game and not a people's game. And while that's good because you need to look at conversion rate and how things are flowing, you also have to look at you have to have that psychological insight of why are people doing what they're doing, right? It's not enough to just say, oh, sales were bad, it's too expensive, let's lower prices. It's like you're saying, timing's probably bad, or maybe there's other offers, or let's just go ask them. I think a lot of marketers forget that the people receiving the emails are people.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and it's at scale, I understand, and it's you can't target everyone, but it's like you still have to understand that they're people with their own lives going on.
And to that point, I had a client who decided to do a launch right when social media marketing world was up going on. Right. So what happened was their audience was also a lot of people would go there. Right.
Mhm.
So it was a conference that was a real life thing that they lost. They were like, why was the opt-in so low? Why was the views so low on the videos? Why
Because
would
everyone's at a
the
conference.
webinar? And so at that point in time, I was like, I was just trying to, I was like, I don't know. We've run this thing pretty consistently. We get pretty consistent numbers. I don't know. There's got to be something going on. So I just happened to open up a calendar, and I saw on Twitter the hashtag. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's why. But
Yeah.
that goes along with the people, right? Like, it's like there are humans on the other end of it. And yes, while it's a math problem where we think we could just turn on a switch and like the thing will just flow and all the numbers will work themselves
Right.
out, well, the human element there. And that goes back to what I was saying before about motivation, intention, understanding the behavior of the person.
Mhm.
If this is a person that's going to go to a conference that is at the exact same time as your launch, then, well, maybe postpone the launch a week, right?
Yeah.
So you have to
Or
think about these things.
and that's why I think it's important to also be on your competitors' lists, right? So understand when they're launching, because especially if you're into marketing, you can tell a good month or so if they know what they're doing when they're going to start ramping up for that launch, and make sure that
Absolutely.
you're not going live at the same time they are, right?
Hmm.
And make sure that if you have affiliates, that everyone's schedules align, and don't try to launch on Black Friday. Like there's just so many
Yeah,
like
I mean it's funny. Like I try to think outside the box sometimes with helping out my clients and myself too. Like, so like Black Friday. Cyber Monday. Like, people's inboxes are going to be obliterated with stuff.
Mhm.
People are going to be they're going to have tabs open, refreshing for flash deals and like
Mhm.
so on and so forth. They're just not going to be paying attention to your thing. So I say, well, do an anti Black Friday, right? Let's on Tuesday, the week before, let's do something, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, name it Business A Tuesday, right? Like,
Right.
just make it your own, right? And kind of think outside the box, or do something that's completely out of the box, like Black Friday, right? So, like,
Mhm.
one of the things was, uh, you know, and this was just an experiment that I ran, was like, hey, this thing is now this price, and I raised it. And what happened was, the week and a half prior to that, I said, "Hey, my Black Friday thing is coming. This price is going to be affected on this product." Um, I didn't
Raise
say up or
prices on Black
down,
Friday.
right? So I raised prices on Black Friday, but I didn't tell them that I was going to raise prices until Wednesday. And I
Yeah.
said, "Look, this is the final time you get to see this at this price." Um, and then, boom, like a whole
Yeah.
bunch of people came in at that point in time. So
That's awesome.
trying to think a little bit more about, if you really want to stand out from the thing, like you said before, like tell a story, engage in a different way that's going to be interesting, and then it doesn't become an ad, right? Like,
Mhm.
it becomes shareable maybe, or something like that. Like, just, if you're into marketing and you're trying to do something that is in a crowded space, you kind of almost have to think 5 degrees to the left
Right.
sometimes just to stand out.
Yeah, I actually I made a joke last year that, oh, we're gonna start having Black Friday in September, and this year my first Black Friday email was first week in November. So
Yeah.
people are starting to, and even we're doing we call it the 3 Black Friday sale. So Friday before until Friday after, we're doing our
Mm.
sale because people don't have time to shop on Black Friday anymore. Like I
Yeah.
think it's interesting because I think Black Friday is starting, other than like going to Walmart for like the spectacle of it. I think that most people are like, I know the sales are going to be going on. I know there's going to be other sales. I don't have to go to a store to buy anything anymore. So I'm just going to wait for the Christmas sale. Or it's like the Christmas sale will be there 2 weeks before Christmas. It'll get
Mhm.
there in time. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny you say that. Like, my wife and my mother-in-law always go shopping on Black Friday. It's crazy. Like, but then, like, they go to the mall and all that, and they get like the doorbuster deals and whatever, right?
Hmm.
And she always I'm like, "You're nuts!" Like, the first time we started dating, and she did that, I'm like, What are you, crazy? Why would you do that?" And like, she always and never fails. She'll take a picture of the parking lot at the mall, and it's dead. It's like totally empty, and she always comes back with good deals and things like that.
Hmm.
But to your point, last year I wanted to buy a new monitor, right? And so what happened was, I bought this nice 42-inch monitor, right? And things like that. And my wife and I were in this house now 2.5 years, right?
Hmm.
And so we had our old TV from the apartment, which was also 42 inches, right? And it
Hmm.
kind of was, let's face it, I was saying it was small, right, for the room and all that.
Right.
So I wanted to get a bigger one. And so I had shopped around, and I was like, okay, this is the TV that I want. I'm gonna wait for Black Friday, right? And so my wife and I discussed it a little bit, and we're like, yeah, dude, I mean, this TV works. Like, it doesn't. We don't really need to spend this money. We got Christmas, and my son's birthday is 2 days after Christmas. Like, do we really need to spend a few $100 on the
Hmm.
TV right now? Like, we don't really need it, right? And so went ahead. I said, look, I'm buying the monitor because I need that. My other monitor was going, so there was a legit reason for it. So I bought the monitor. A week later, our TV went, the whole thing. Like, I'm watching TV, and it looked like it was like
Ah,
paint, like just all the colors melded together. It was like,
oh
and the whole
man.
thing went. I'm like, a week after Black Friday, even after Cyber Monday. Like, come
Oh
on,
man.
like, are you kidding? So I was so annoyed, and I was like, just wait till the Super Bowl,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like I just took the old monitor, put the old 24 back, put the
But the old,
42 back in the
yeah.
new monitor into there, and I was just like, but you're right. Like, you could just wait, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the same thing too. Is like, a lot of these times with the funnels and all the rest of it, you're also training your viewers, right? So if they don't convert on the back
Yeah.
on the front end, now they know that you do this thing. So
And
if
this is,
they're there with you enough, they're going to see it multiple times.
yeah, and this is why I always liked Ramit Sethi's strategy of he never discounts. What he does is he opens up a product. You cannot buy his you might be able to now, but his flagship products you used to not be able to buy
Hmm.
normally. You have to be in a launch or an evergreen funnel to buy it.
Right.
And so it made them special. And so there wasn't oh, I'm just going to wait until it's on sale again, right? Because you knew you weren't getting that until he opened it up again.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that type of scarcity, I think everyone puts things on sale so much that sales have it was like, what was it? J.C. Penney, I think, or Macy's. It was probably Macy's. Recently had problems because they put everything on sale all the time. You go into a store, everything's on sale, right? So it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
When all you're doing is selling and all you're doing is discounting, it no longer makes the product valuable, and people are just going to wait for the cheapest value they can, not think, oh, I really got to grab this now. Just like with your TV, it's like, oh, I missed Black Friday. Christmas is in 2 weeks, and then Super Bowl's a month after that.
Right.
Like these are prime TV buying seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sean D'Souza of Psychotactics does the same thing. Like, he'll open up the window to, I think it's his community, right?
Hmm.
Like, he'll tell you that he's got these other products, and then he'll open up this limited seat window sort of thing for all the other products. But if you've bought the community first, then you get first dibs.
Yep.
Like, he'll send an email to his list the day before, and that'll be to the community members, and then you hope that the product is still available, right?
Right.
And so he does it such limited seats that that product is never available to the public. So you kind
Right.
of have to buy into his community when he opens that, so that
Yep.
then you could go ahead and get all the other things. So that whole FOMO
Yeah.
scarcity model, I think works
Yeah.
well too.
And I think you end up training your audience for good or bad, right? If
Mhm.
you do it like Sean or Ramit, and your audience knows when this goes out, they've got 20 seats or 50 seats or however many it is, and that thing's going to go like that.
Mhm.
Then there's this scramble. There's this, I have to make that decision right now. I can't sit on the fence because then it's going to be gone until who knows when.
Mhm.
And that's a good way to train your audience because it creates that fear of missing out. The converse of that is if you're always pitching and that's all you do and it's always sales, then everyone knows, oh, I'll just wait till the next one, right? So it removes, even though you're creating scarcity by having that discount, you're actually removing it through that long-term training, right?
Mhm.
And half of it is understanding your audience and half of it is understanding how you have trained your audience to react. There was an interesting tweet I saw that said, "I bet when anyone rang a bell, that Pavlov thought about feeding his dog." Right,
I've seen that. Yeah, yeah.
and it's really true. It's the reverse. It's like you're creating the scarcity, but once you've done it multiple times, what is the overall message of your marketing that you're seeing? And it's very hard for the product owner, the product creator, to understand that, which is look at this through fresh eyes, through
Right.
someone who doesn't see all your marketing funnels. And how does someone like that view your marketing? It's
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I tell that a lot to my clients. Like, pretend like you first time coming through. Go through
mhm,
your emails, sign up, get your free newsletter, your 10% discount. Like, how does all of that work? Go grab an alias or to an email and just put it in a folder and then read.
yeah,
Like, pretend like you're a customer of this brand. Would you buy from them?
yeah,
Or what is your perception? Do you think they're selling too much, or are they not selling enough? Or, and so it's interesting to when you put yourself on the other side of the table there, because what I tell a lot of my clients is like, you are training. So
mhm,
to the effect of what your emails look like, what do your links look like? Are you only including one link? Are you including three?
right,
Your email format varied. Like, do they know that on Thursday they're going to be getting a roundup, you know, bunch of links of
right,
resources that are around the web versus your Monday email, which is always a video, right?
right.
Like, they start to understand that sort of thing. And then if you change that and you change it at a drastic level where they actually enjoyed and those things were converting for you, well, why
They
do you
don't know
think
what to
your
expect
numbers went
anymore.
down?
Yeah,
Right. And
and
so,
it's interesting because I actually started sending myself the emails because it's one thing to read them in
right.
in your email system, and it's like because you're reading them all in a block, right? And so you
Mhm.
don't understand the cadence that goes behind it. And I started sending them to myself. I just put myself every couple of months, I put myself in the beginning of the funnel and I just run through it. And I make specific notes. I try to read every one, but I make notes about when I'm like, I really don't want to read this. And I'm
Right.
wondering like, why didn't I want to read this? Or I read an email and it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting out of this email. I know I wrote it. Like, but
Yeah.
the mood that I'm in right now with the cadence of being busy every day and this just popped into my inbox, I now have a different relationship with it than when I was in a Google Doc writing it.
Yeah.
Right. And
100%.
that I think is valuable. It's like when they say with SaaS products, you need to sign up for your product every month to check that onboarding flow. A, make sure it
Mhm.
works. B, make sure that it's still viable, that it's the best it can be. Same with your email funnel.
Yeah, and to that point, to that next level is where are they reading it? Are they
Yeah.
reading it on their desktop? Are they reading it on their phone? Right? Because like a lot of my e-commerce clients did like 70+% of their viewership on their web is mobile, right? Like
Hmm.
it's just people are shopping on their phones now or iPads or something of that nature. So don't write long form email, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're writing long form email, there's a good chance if they're looking on their phone, there's going to be a notice, right? That comes in and pops in. And if that notice is a text message or Instagram post or who
Hmm.
knows what, they're going to click that and your email's gone, right?
Yep.
So get to the point, pretty concise, especially, and this is where the analytics side of things goes in, understanding what your viewerships are doing. Like what are the subscribers doing on your website versus just assuming what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like you said, Google Docs looks very much different than Gmail, right?
Right.
Like, what does it look like in Gmail? Is this a big wall of text, even though that it might be just nicely formatted and spaced out in
Right.
Google Docs? So you have to really kind of do. I love that you do that because I encourage anybody to put themselves through their own funnels to make sure that it makes sense. Links work. Things look good. I mean,
Hmm.
I do the same thing, and to this day, like I know I have to fix a logo on a page. Like 'cause when I
Yep.
tested it, like the logo was all wonky, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, this. I'm like, how many people saw this now? Like, and then it's you got to take pride in that in what
And
you're sending out.
yeah, and you can't let it get to you that every time you go through it, something else is going to be wrong.
Mhm.
First book I wrote, I must have edited that thing 80 times because I was stupid and I edited it myself. And but every time I went through it, I found something else, and I'm like, "Jeeb, like just man, oh man." Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, you do have to validate, like, get another pair of eyes. Like right now, what I noticed is for a client, I guess this is a change in Gmail that I always like. I always alias, right? Like
Hmm.
Jason plus whatever at my email, right? And so I've always done that for years now. And
Hmm.
I'm just like Jason plus highly engaged, Jason plus no engagement, right?
Right.
And I put those through the funnel and take action just to make sure that the sequence and automation and tagging and all the rest of it work. Well, I noticed last week that I put 4 subscribers through a funnel, all different stage. All of a sudden, after the first 2 emails, I was only getting one,
Hmm.
just deliverable to one. And I'm like, well, what the heck is going on here? I found out that Gmail, well, the way that it now works is that if they see that there's the same email that's happening at a certain period of time,
Hmm.
uh, even though it's an alias, they're actually saying, okay, this is the same email address
And they're
and it's
just
the same.
dumping it.
So I don't know that they're dumping it. They're just kind of like merging it because on the other side of things, it says it was delivered,
Oh
right? And
wow.
so for me it's like, oh, that's awesome. So Gmail, I mean, I get why they do that because
Right.
Gmail is basically saying, why are we going to flood this person's inbox? Because it's the same email, it's literally the
Right.
same content and it's the same email address, it's just aliased. So but for me as a tester, it's hard for me now to test. So
Right.
I have my wife going through one of my funnels that I'm testing. So I'm always like, every hour I'm like, okay, I gotta go go check your
Go check
phone.
that one.
And so, but the thing is, it's like she has a different phone, she has a different
Right.
desktop and all that. So now I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't look good on this phone. So
Yeah.
now I could go adjust it and change that way.
As soon as someone can do mobile responsive emails where it will take out parts of the email, if you're on a mobile device, I think it's going to print so much money. Like, can you imagine being able to write long form emails for desktop and then have it condensed down and like only specific CTAs and stuff for mobile?
that'd be
It'd be
pretty
really
sick.
nice.
Yeah,
It'd be
yeah.
really nice. Awesome, Jason. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I've so many more things I wanted to ask and talk to you about, but I do want to be conscious of your time. Where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Sure. I'm at Res on Twitter. That's Res with three Z's,
Hmm.
and res.com as well with three
Sounds good.
Z's.
And we'll link those in the show notes as well. All right,
Awesome.
Jason. Thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. Take care.